Hello there, Euro scholars, and going to introduce just a little bit about the Royal Society and this concept of virtuosi today. And we're dealing with the structures of knowledge and how these are institutionalized and how institutions play with it. We've seen the development of the 7 liberal arts. We've seen the development of the church schools under Charlemagne, and how education was dominated by schools, then the creation of universities, and now we're looking at, here in the scientific revolution, the Royal Society as an institution. And there's a very good video that I want you to watch by this big-time scholar on the origins and the sort of early setting up the purpose of this Royal Society. And the key to watching it is there's these classic names. There's Robert Hooke, there's Newton, there's Christopher Wren, there's John Evelyn, there's all these, big names. But the key to it is actually how they relate to each other and how they validate each other, and they become a validating organization for knowledge. They're not just sort of like hero scientists, and that's where we're going to start. Okay, here's our hero scientists, and we're going to deal a little bit more with Wren on the next time, and we're especially going to deal with Haley, who I find fascinating. Edmund Haley. Boyle, we've talked about Boyle, and Boyle, Chapin did so much work with Boyle, and it's really great. And then of course there's the big Isaac right up there. So what we tend to do in especially scientific history of science, is to create these guys as heroes, and they sort of like autonomous. There's an idea, which is that they are the ones who think outside of the box. Somehow they're the genius, and they are the ones who advance science. There's certain truth to that, certain amount of truth to it. It's a very romantic notion. And that's why what's interesting is this. See, we often talk about the virtuoso in terms of music. But you see, in the 17th century, a virtuoso was like Edmund Haley or Christopher Wren or Robert Boyle. Remember, Robert Boyle wrote The Christian Virtuoso, which was about how Christianity and knowledge work together in this sort of like pursuit. And there's a sort of monkish quality, a sort of a priest-like quality to a scientist for Boyle. And he doesn't use that term scientist. That comes later. It's a natural philosopher or something like that. And what's behind that is that the concept of the virtuosi is not the romantic concept of the virtuoso that comes in the 19th century and on up till today. We love to think of these people as just sort of heroes, and historians, us, we are often the perpetrators of this. We love the great man theory. The video will actually name the great institution theory, which is another sort of side, it's a romantic notion that there's, along comes a person and the world changes. There are some truths to that, there are great figures. I am a big believer in biography and how important it is. But biography often tells us the particulars of something that's more general, rather than the story of the avant-garde artist with the black turtleneck who's gonna, somehow be a genius, okay? Or the musician that's a genius. As much as I think Bob Dylan's a genius, that's just a really rare thing. And then there's what goes on in science. Somehow Darwin. The name Darwin becomes, all sorts of things get collected up with it. Newton, all these things get collected up with. So that's why we destabilize that thinking, and that's what I'm trying to do in the class today. So I'm just introducing that. Watch that video, read the stuff I've got, and I'm going to talk about that. But I wanted to just show you a couple things here. So, here's Darwin, there's Newton. I am guessing that's Francis Bacon, but That's a good one. All right. So what you have is, instead of the hero scientists, the real sort of very interesting thing that happened at this formative period of the Enlightenment is the creation of a gentleman's club. And it's a gentleman's club of people who are intellectually stimulating and what they want to do. And interestingly, a lot of gentlemen's clubs like this. The 17th century has lots of clubs. John Locke recommends that everybody set up a club, a little society, and that they would help each other, develop. And this is an age when the universities are good. Universities create a curriculum in which you can get certified and stuff like that, Oxford, Cambridge, especially in England. But on the other hand, is if you really want to be stimulated, create a club. This is where the Wesleyans create a holy club. What gets called this holy club. It's where they have a method. They create the beginning of the Methodist movement. Methodism is a very Enlightenment version of Christianity, rooted in the ideas of Wesley, who's an incredibly early 18th century figure. He lives a long time, but he has a lot of his formative stuff in the early 1700s as a student and a tutor at Oxford, where he's part of these clubs. And these clubs are to create a little extra for you. And so there's a scientific club. If you're interested in geometry and you're a naturalist, or you just love astronomy, or you want to do math, you get together with a bunch of your buddies, okay? And usually these are guys, but there's some really interesting women who are part of these sort of things too, but mostly guys, and they are these clubs. And so the Royal Society is like one of these clubs at one level. At another level, dang it, they get themselves royal charter, and they take themselves more seriously. And so in taking themselves more seriously, they write books about themselves, and it becomes something bigger. And we look back on it now and go, yeah, they really did have a very important part. A key element in that video is when you move from being a place where you do experiments and show them to each other, to a place where you sort of validate each other's work, okay? So that's really cool. Now, in this role of as an institutional structure, a sociology of knowledge, because you're not just this genius who comes up with someone and everybody goes, "Ooh, you're a genius." No, it's more a institutional thing. Is you have these secretaries, okay? You see, he's very proud of being a Royal Society secretary. Man, look at it. He's got his stuff. This is a job which is key, because you're the person who facilitates. The video will talk about Oldenburg. You're the one who makes the connections, keeps the glue working. We have social media today, so maybe this is all going to change in the future. I don't know, But the thing is, big thing back then was you had a republic of letters. People living all over the place, and you would write to the secretary. And then the secretary would sort of make sure that the right people know the right stuff. This is exactly what goes on in what the article I've given you to watch, or to read, not watch. Now, first of all, just as a step back, this was printed in the New England Quarterly, and I'm going to talk about another one that's printed in the Winter Tour Portfolio. So a journal, Royal Society puts out a journal, and a journal becomes a sort of like authoritative rubber stamp on your work. I was published here, therefore my scholarship ranks at the level of the journal that I publish in. Now, I published this in the New England Quarterly. New England Quarterly is a good journal. Rubber stamp, good stuff. Not the highest quality journal. And the big boy articles would be published by big boy journals. William and Mary Quarterly is a big boy journal. This is a lower journal, but it's more American studies, more like, I like these people better. So, these, shouldn't say that, I don't like these people. I like this, just that I want you to know that there's layers and levels to these journals. And The Royal Society, that's a big one. That's a big boy journal. But it's these journals and organizations which are so important for the production of European intellectual history. And this is where they start, is in this sort of 17th century world of clubs. And so I gave you this article that I wrote, oh gosh, long, long ago. Thomas Brattle and Scientific Provincialism in New England. Part of the reason I wanted you to read it is because the mathematics is important and the mathematical idealism and how it spreads out to America. But we're not doing American history. What's most interesting for us here is this here, okay? This is Brattle is a guy who's living in Boston across the Atlantic, and he needs to get in contact with the Royal Society. He wants to be validated. Christopher Wren is the president at that time. He writes a letter, and then it's Edmund Halley. See, it's Edmund Halley, one of the Society's most diligent members, picked up the paper, these observations that Brattle had done, and passed them on to Newton. And it's there that Newton puts them into his Principia. And this is the way things work also, is here's this kid, frontier, provincial astronomer, and he, to just do it himself is not, that's not enough. You need to connect up to the institutions of knowledge and get validated within the new institutions of knowledge. And Brattle hit the jackpot. This is the biggest jackpot you could imagine for an American frontier kid, is to get then your data published by Isaac Newton in the Principia. So, hey, Brattle, Thomas, go. That's the brother of William, the other guy. So, one other thing is I wanted to show you is this one here. Let me get out to this. Okay, this is a sort of companion piece article. These are on my dissertation. The dissertation wasn't published. I made a couple articles out of it. This is more architecture, okay? And the key to this is that Brattle, in this article, I bring up more how Brattle travels to England and becomes very interested in getting in touch personally with these people. He meets Robert Boyle. He goes to Boyle's house. Boyle has these little soirees at his house. He meets apparently Christopher Wren, and he brings the architecture of Christopher Wren. That's the building in the center there. That's the Stoughton Hall at Harvard that Brattle designed. And then down here at the end of the article is where he builds the first steepled church in America, which is bringing over Christopher Wren's designs out of this mathematical idealism. And then what I would wanted you to see here then is how Flamsteed is the royal astronomer. Here's Evelyn and Wren, you know, and is traveling over to France, and he starts measuring buildings, you know, and this is all so Enlightenment. He's just such an, you know, almost a caricature of the Enlightenment. And then this notion that he, Brattle thought of himself as an architect in the sense of Evelyn's architectus ingenio, and this is not the genius of Romantic era. This has got, you know, something inside. Is it clear in his letter to Flamsteed where he talks about himself being this architect in the provincial Boston. So this is really a fun stuff. This is just a roll of just so many wonderful, interesting people who do so many different things. We're going to talk about Halley and Captain Cook and their voyages and magnetism and stuff next time. But right now, we're not focusing on the content of any one science, but how that knowledge, how that Enlightenment world structures itself so that the Enlightenment becomes a thing, which then dominates Europe, spreads out to the Americas and stuff, and becomes a type of thing in which we look back and go, wow, the world was changed, and we can call it the Enlightenment, but there's no longer like the Bishop of Rome doing it, or it's not. It's a different institution's been created, and multiple different institutions. And one at the center is the Royal Society, which still exists. So, let me send you to your work and have fun. Give me a call, send me an email, tell me you exist. Bye.